welcome everyone to the Mountaineer Farm Talk. My name is JJ Barrett. I'm the extension agent in Wood County, West Virginia.
And I'm John David Johnson, and I'm the extension agent in Jackson County, West Virginia.
And I'm Evan Wilson. I'm the ag agent for both Wayne and Cabell counties, West Virginia.
Yeah, welcome everyone. Farm Talk. We are on every Friday at 10 a.m. So if you're interested in livestock nutrition, animal health, pastures improvement, farm management, crop production, country and western music, rural health issues, gardening or horticulture, or any other related topic to agriculture and farming, you're at the right place. So join us every Friday at 10 o'clock, and we'll learn, share, laugh, and enjoy a cup of cowboy coffee. And we encourage audience participation, so have your questions ready. Today with us, we have two special guests. We have Dr. Clyde Lane, and we have Larry Moorehead, both from the University of Tennessee Extension. And we're going to be talking about reducing hay losses when storing round bales. Of course, hay season now is in full swing, and producers are rolling up round bales, not only to use as winter feed, but also to sell. So Clyde and Larry are going to shed some light on some tips for storing round bales to reduce waste and save your valuable hay. So first, I want to welcome Clyde. How are you doing today, Clyde?
Doing great. Glad to be here with you.
Good. We're glad to have you. Clyde, of course, is retired from he was the University of Tennessee livestock specialist. And besides working with forages, he's done all kinds of other programs with beef producers, back to the basics, feeder calf marketing, working with farmers to put in new facilities for handling, just all kinds of programs with master beef producer. So I can go on and on and on, but welcome to the program. Larry, how are you doing today? Can you hear me, Larry?
You're muted, Larry.
But you've gotten muted.
We'll have him unmute here, but
all right. I'm sorry about that. I'm not a technology person. Clyde Lane got me into a lot of work back a few years ago between him and Joe Burns. Joe was our forage specialist, and he sent out a thing one time and told us we need to look at how much hay we were wasting stacking round bales outside. And that was in the late 80s. And we did some tests, did it on about 3 or 4 different farms, and I was done, because what we found is from June till January, we were losing a third or more of our hay, depending on what kind of hay it is and how you stacked it and where you put it. And from there, I started pushing hay barns. Probably one of the best compliments I ever got. A guy asked me one day at a hog show, said I'd pass through Moore County as a traveling salesman, said y'all got more nice hay barns than any place I've been. And he said, what's the cause of that? So I started smiling like a possum eating grapes, because I'd pushed it. I figure a man can pay for a hay barn in 5 years with the losses we can have in hay. And I don't push building enough hay barns to store all your hay, but at least the spring and summer cutting, because there's too much loss in that first 6 months it's laying out there. We've done different things, used tarps. Listen, they're a job, they're expensive. In the long run, you just well off build you a barn. And we've had some problems with barns. We burn a few over the years, and that's because we're putting hay too green in the barn. One year we had a bunch of wheat to freeze, and I guess that's the worst year we had with barns burning. We could not cure the hay out, and we had some barns burn over a month after they were filled up. But basically, if we'll watch the moisture, get it down, check the temperature before we put it in the barn, we can be in pretty good shape.
Yeah, I guess you're saying that you can have up to, if you were storing them outside, what conditions were farmers storing them where they had a 1/3 loss on their round bales?
Well, what we were doing there was on the ground without any cover,
Yeah.
and those got up toward 40% loss.
Really?
And then what we done, my test that we did was covering them different ways, you know, with plastic, with tarps, stacking them, getting them off the ground. What we basically found was that we lost about 15–20% from the bottom, 15–20% from the top. And in the late 80s is when the net wrap balers started coming out. And matter of fact, we had the first baler ever come into the county to do some the samples with farmers, and I had one of those. The net wrap really helps because it keeps the hay slick on top. It can shed off, and you know what strings do. Once they get wet, they'll swell up between the strings, and that just lets water get into the bale. But the net wrap really helps. But if you don't get it off the ground, you're still going to lose 15–20% from the bottom in the first 6 months. Of course, our average rainfall here is about 55 inches. Some years we have 100 inches. We're standing on 25 inches right now and almost halfway through the year, so this may not be the best year we've had for moisture. But anyhow, basically, you know, 15–20% from the bottom, 15–20% on top. But the net wrap really does a good job now, keeping it slick. And also, you know, at first the net wrap balers are a little higher and the net wrap was a little higher, but now there's not much difference. And you save enough time in baling to go with the net wrap. It just saves a lot of time. I don't bale hay myself anymore, but I used to. And if you had good hay, it took as long, even with a 2-tire, it took as long to wrap the bale as it did make the bale of hay. And the net wrap, you know, by the time you get the tractor stopped, you're ready to dump.
Now on the bottoms there, you was talking about the bottoms and the net wrap there. I really like the net wrap. That's kind of the way I go personally in my operation. And now storing it on the bottoms. Okay, you know, best scenario, we put it in the barn, but that bottom layer is still on the ground. Even if you're outside, you know, you're going to have it on the ground. What have you found is the best barrier between that hay and the ground? Because some people use pallets, some people use large rock, some people, I don't like tarp, but I've seen them use tarp on the ground. What have you seen is, you know, if they are, that bottom layer in the barns are stored outside, what is the best thing to put under those hay bales?
Okay, in the barn, you know, if you're building a new house and you're building a garage and you're going to have a concrete floor in it, what do they put under the concrete?
Gravel.
Plastic. They put plastic
okay.
under the concrete to keep it from sweating. Same thing in a hay barn. Now, I hadn't convinced all my farmers, but a lot of them will. The state at one time was paying on geotextile. You don't need geotextile inside the barn. You need geotextile outside the barn where we have rainwater. All right. But in the barn, if you'll put down a good layer of plastic, then cover with gravel, the strings won't even rot on the bottom of the bale of hay because you've cut the moisture out. Now, outside, you know, river gravel, creek gravel, or anything 6–8 inches deep will protect the bottom of the hay. I had an old farmer here that y'all remember the bonnets when they first come out with round bales. You got 4 pegs and a piece of plastic go over the top of your hay, depending on what size bale you had. He went down there and he was lucky, had a gravel barn in the river he had access to, and he put gravel knee deep. And he did a good job just using gravel. But now you sit it on the ground, you know, the ground attracts moisture. I would not put plastic under gravel outside because the plastic's going to hold the rainwater in, okay? But in a barn, it works great. It works great. That's what I did with my barns.
You were talking about you guys, a lot of producers grow wheat. Do they dry bale that, or do they wrap that for
dry bale? Dry bale. Yeah.
And then they'll feed that this winter.
Yeah, yeah. Now, you know, wheat hay is good hay, does a good job. What we got off trying to raise, we need quantity. Uh, we don't know the difference in feeding wheat straw and good grass hay to our slop cattle. They need fiber. And what we found is we just need to produce all the fiber we can. A few years ago, we got off on Bermuda. We did a good job with Bermuda. Our yields were great, but it got to where between the stem maggot and army worms would lose a cut in a year. Got a lot of boys that's got crabgrass, Red River, and Quick and Big, and that yields better than just grass. And then we get a good cutting of wheat every spring. But like I say, we need volume of hay. It don't have to be that high quality for our mash feeders.
Yeah, speaking of that, not to change directions too much, but you mentioned that Red River crabgrass. You have a lot of guys that have. I know that you'll probably be a little bit hotter down there than we are, but it seems to me that's a great summer annual for these hot temperatures. You guys have a lot.
Yeah.
You have a lot of producers that seeded that variety.
Yeah. Well, that and Quick and Big, I've got about equal numbers of each one. The Quick and Big has a little bigger leaf on it, grows a little taller. I guess if I was going to pick one to sow for myself, I would go with the Quick and Big, just what I've seen of it the last few years. The thing I like about crabgrass too over Bermuda grass is Bermuda grass, every cutting goes down in quality. By the time you get to August, we're looking at 5-7% protein, TDN, you know, down under 50. But crabgrass, first cut and last cutting is going to be about the same.
Yep.
And my daddy would turn over in his grave. He knew I was pushing crabgrass.
It's my favorite wheat to feed the cattle. I guarantee you that. I've got some great gains on crabgrass over the years, and I love it. And it when that warm weather comes in there, and you get a little rain here and there, it keeps clicking
Yes,
on.
sir.
Real quick, Larry, on the because we always have a few producers that will do some. They'll either do like cover crop rye, or they'll do some wheat and then bale it up. What's your nutritional numbers on that for forage analysis?
Well, wheat cut prior to, you know, we try to get it in the boot stage. This year we were a little late. It had done beginning to head. I had some producers that it was done in the milk stage by the time I got it cut. If we can cut it in the boot stage, wheat hay, you know, we can get easily 55-60% TDN, and you know, the protein's going to be 11 or better. But now, of course, the more mature, just like any other grass, it's going to go downhill.
Well, that's not bad for wheat.
Like I say, I have run tests with our slop feeding or mash feeding. We call it slop here at home. But anyhow, wheat straw will do just as good orchard grass or anything, any kind of hay. We need the fiber. We need the fiber.
Clyde, you've been quiet. What's going through your mind listening to all this here? I mean, where do you stand on you know, the varieties and maybe how to store some of this as well?
I kind of leave a variety thing up to folks like Larry. He's the expert on that. That's the reason I asked him to sit in. He's right on top of it, one of our top agents, and we're proud to have him doing that. I was going to kind of go back on the hay storage a little bit and just think about some of the touch on some of the things that he's already talked about, but a little more detail. Take a look at that. How many of your farmers have got a compost thermometer?
Not many.
That's something they need to go ahead and get. You know, how do they know when a bale is ready to be put in the barn? You know, it's got to go through that heat after it's baled up. And you put it in too quick, guess what? You're going to have a good fire out there. So, you know, be sure that you've got it dried out real good, put the hay in the barn, still use it again, check periodically, particularly that first week or two after you put that hay in there, and see what that temperature is. You know, if you're down below 130, Larry, we're in good shape. You get up about 150, you start sweating a little bit. If you get up 160, you better start getting that out, because what you're going to have is a big fire. And if you read 190, what you got to do then is just be real calm, back your tractor up, go calmly to the house, call the fire department, then go back out there because you're going to have a big fire. So once it gets that oxygen, the heat and everything is there, it just needs that oxygen to burn.
So Clyde, you're
Another
saying
thing,
that,
you know, we talk about having these barns or sheds, whatever we're doing. I've seen a number of producers, well, you know, while I'm building, I'm going to build a big one so I can put most of it in. It may be economically, that may work out, but by golly, I like to have mine spread out a little bit. When I talk about this, I think about, I was going to a field day down at Ames Plantation a few years ago, and I passed a barn that was basic. Well, it had been a barn because all I could see was just the remnants of that, plus that smoking hay. He had over 200 round bales of hay in there. When I drive by that same farm now, he's got about 4 barns scattered out strategically so that if there's a fire, all eggs are not in one basket. So yes, it's a loss, but nothing like it would be if all of it was together. Yeah. And one other word of caution when thinking about fires is it's a hay barn when you put hay in there. It's not a tractor shed. That 200 bales that I told you about on that particular barn, a pickup truck, a tractor, a hay baler, and other pieces of equipment went up with it.
yeah, oh my.
Oh, that's a tough day. So we need to put our machinery somewhere else and put the hay out there by itself, just a safety thing. You know, maybe spending too much time on that, but by golly, if you suffer a loss, it's a tremendous loss.
Yeah, Clyde, what did you say the temperature, what does it have to be below before you can put it in the barn?
I'd like to see it, Larry. Wouldn't you? 130?
Well, I go a little lower than you. You know, what I look at when of course, my daddy, been dead a long time, but anyhow, daddy was an old farmer, and he talked about hay sweating, and it goes through a heat after you bale it. I don't care what moisture, it's going to go up some. Now, if you get down 12, 14% moisture, it's going to go up very little, and it's going to do it in a day or two.
Yeah.
The thing that I look at, once it peaks, if it goes above 120, I tell my farmers not to stack it until it gets back below 120, and we hadn't had any trouble with that. Most hay that's baled below 18% moisture, Clyde got me to do a test a few years ago, and I wouldn't do it unless I have sold those compost thermometers over 400 through my office. I've got farmers that's got enough to put a thermometer in every bale of hay that they haul in the barn at a time. When he comes back with the next load, the only bales he puts in the barn are the ones that's under 120 that's been baled 2 or 3 days. But anyhow, I've sold all those thermometers. They're just as good. I have a moisture tester, bought it back in the 80s. But anyhow, when Clyde wanted me to do this stacking test, he helped me buy some more thermometers. And I had 4 different farms where we stacked hay different ways, checking temperature. One thing I will point out, you know, even if we cut hay, one of the tests that Clyde got me to do, we cut the hay, we baled it at below 18. We didn't get above 120 for a week. A week later, we had a week of rain. You know, a bale of hay is just like a sponge. It'll take in moisture. After that week was up, we had hay to get up to 130 degrees. It never got any higher, but because it was absorbing moisture from the atmosphere, the humidity was 90% during that week of rain. And that's something you got to watch too, because it can take on moisture after you get in the bale. You know, I balance rations for, I don't need to say how long, Clyde, but I've always figured hay at 10% dry matter. Folks, there's not much hay that gets down to 10%. You know, 12 is about as low as it gets. But fooling with the moisture tester and stuff and thermometers over the years, I'm with Clyde. My next door neighbor burned a barn. Matter of fact, the first barn that was built in my county, and I helped him build it. Helped 500 rolls of hay. Folks, it went up in flames. I still own the tractor. that he come and got at my house to try to get some hay out of the barn. And the second bale he picked up exploded. When it catches on fire, what you need to do is save the other barns. Don't worry about that, and you ain't gonna put it out.
Let's stay on this topic about wet bales here. Now, what's the rule of thumb when it regarding hay out in the field? You know, we dry it down, we get it baled. You know, if we can let it sit a little bit out in the sunshine without rain coming in, we will. What happens? You get a little bit of light sprinkle on that hay. I mean, what's the rule then? Or is it outside from then on, or can you let it sit for a week or so?
No, let it sit and dry off, and check temperatures on it before you put it in the barn. You know, some of the first tests I done, we went through a period of raining like heck. Our temperatures would get down, you know, in the low hundreds, 110 or something. We get a rain on it, shoot it right back up to 130, because that moisture is what makes the heat. And whether it's rainwater or the water from the sap of the grass, same thing works. But we had some hay we left out for a month because it kept raining on it. Now, once we get temperatures down, we'll put it in the dry.
Okay, well, what about on the side of a barn? If you have, you know, open sides, you know, maybe the back closed in and open sides, and if you have some of the hay that's in that barn that is getting a little bit of precipitation on the sides of that, what's the rule there? How dangerous is that?
We have not had a problem with that. I'm not saying it can't be, but most time if we get it dry and the temperature low when we put it in there, Clyde, we hadn't done any tests to see if it's worth the money to box a barn, you know, completely enclose it. I like to see 3 sides enclosed. You know, we lose some when it blows in the side. And in Middle Tennessee, you leave the east end open. Okay. Our bad windstorms comes out of the southwest, and 2 years ago, I had a barn builder call me and said, "You need to go see this farmer. He wants me to box 3 sides and leave the west end open because he wanted to sit at the breakfast table and look at his hay from the house." Well, he built it that way. Folks, 30 days later, had a little windstorm. He'd never put a bale of hay in it, laid it flat on the ground. And luckily he had insured it, and he went back, and what we done, we still left the west end open, but we left cracks at the top. We left 2 foot of space at the top so the air pressure gather. Clyde John Teague's dad-in-law did the same thing. They had to go in and cut holes in the barn. It didn't knock his down, but it almost took it down. But I don't know how your winds are, but if you leave the doors east side. Another thing we're doing, and some of our Mennonites come up with it, is building a bar joist and putting posts on one side 30 foot apart. I like a side loading barn. You know, these old 100-foot barns, if you've got 3 sides enclosed, look how long it takes to haul the hay in there and that kind of stuff. And our side loading barns are 36 to 40 feet wide. Then you can split up your different cuttings. You don't have many posts out in the way, and don't cost a lot more to build a barn like that than it does just a regular barn.
There's a lot of pluses for that because we're going to have a lot of variation in the quality of the hay that we produce, irregardless of what the weather is that particular year. And so, you know, if we got it in 3 or 4, 5 different bays, we can manage feeding that hay, where otherwise, you know, if you put your best hay in the back of the barn and you need it in the middle of the winter, you're screwed. I mean, you just don't have no place to go.
Larry, I want to go back and ask Larry about he was saying as far as economics that explain a little bit more about, you said that a producer could pay for a hay shed in 5 years.
Well, I'm not an economist. I'm pretty tight with my money, but now the economists say it takes 7, 8 years because they figure all this stuff extra. I just figure what I spend on it and what I'm losing in hay. And folks, I mean, I've been to the bank with farmers to borrow money to build barns because I can show the banker how much we can save, and this hadn't been a problem. Ag enhancement came into Tennessee, what, Clyde, 20 years ago?
something like that.
I'm the second smallest county in the state. The first year they come out with it, we already had hay barns everywhere. I was the second highest county in the state on building hay barns because my farmers believe in them. And but as far as paying for them, there's no doubt in my mind we can still. I mean, back in the '80s when I was doing this work, yeah, we were, we was talking about counting $20 a roll for hay. Look what hay's worth today. They may still have some they call $20 a roll, but now you can't bale it for $20 a roll. I'm still with that. We've got one company in Tennessee built 100 by 40-foot barn, enclosed on two sides, for less than $5 and a half a square foot. Now, folks, that barn, you can pay for it in a heartbeat.
One thing I might just mention, prices of timber has gone, or lumber has really gone up in the last while. So these figures are not going to hold today. Hopefully, things will get back to normal, whatever the new normal is supposed to be. And the figures will look a lot better. I would hate, Larry, the price going out today, because you talk about somebody building a $150,000 house, and now they automatically adding another $30,000 to it just simply because of the rise in cost of materials.
It's true.
Well, I have a gentleman that's getting away from the lumber, and he's actually using guardrails, used guardrails for the sides, and even the rafters up top to tack the tin on. And he's actually coming out cheaper using metal now than lumber. And
Yeah.
I thought I'd never see the day when lumber prices and metal barns are going to be comparable, but they are. So I mean, there's different ways in different parts of the country when you have some of these products you can get for a little bit cheaper and be a little handy, get a handy guy out there to build your structure there, and you can get a little bit of price cut, but you still want a good structure. You want it to make
Right.
solid and last for your lifetime anyway.
Well, the numbers we're playing with, whether it's quality of hay or cost of lumber or whatever, we're kind of talking averages, and we suggest everybody really take a close look and look at all the things together and see how it fits. Because, every operation is unique in some way, and some people got resources and others don't. So what we're hoping to do is give you a good starting point to work from.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's the other one, John David, on the creative side on storage. I know several years ago, my grandfather, he just bought a carport, put some round bales in it and stacked it, put some tarps on the sides and used it. I'm not sure that's the best way to go about doing it, but.
Well, we have a lot of high tunnel hay storage now. NRCS come in this part of the country, threw up high tunnels everywhere. They last for about 3 to 4 years, and people decides that's too much work. And you got a high tunnel frame out there, you can get pretty cheap, and then $400 worth of plastic to go over it. You got you a whole barn for probably $3,000. It's 90 foot long and 30 foot wide right there, and that's hard to beat right there.
Yep.
When you're all talking about storing outdoors and on pallets, how many pallets do you all put underneath? 1, 2? Higher the better? Is there a certain height to get them off the ground so they don't soak up as much moisture?
I really don't have an answer on that. And you, Larry?
What was your question? Run it by me again.
So I have some guys that they put pallets underneath. They have a plastic layer, then they put one pallet down. They're trying that this year to keep the moisture off the bottoms of those bales.
Yeah. That is labor intense.
Mm-hmm.
My wife would run me out of the house if she had to feed hay that way. I got people that use old tires, that kind of stuff. But again, it's labor intense. And those old pallets, well, you know what's going to happen in a year or two? You're going to tear up all your tractor tires on it. Go on and purchase. If you haven't got a gravel barn, the creek to use, buy crushed stone and put under the hay inside the barn, but put plastic under it. I think that helps tremendously. It just keeps that from wicking that moisture out of the ground.
Thank you. That's what I was thinking too, and just like to hear somebody else's same thoughts on that.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing we need to keep in mind here too, and Larry mentioned something about this in the very beginning, we're not going to be able to put all of the hay that we produce in the barns, more than likely. And so we really need to do a little sorting here and put our better hay in the barn, and some of that sorry stuff, put it outside and store it to the best of our ability there. And then use it as early as we can, and that we've got stored, use it on up later, and also in the wintertime when, if we're on a January through February, March calving, then we're using some of the better hay there that's not damaged as we go along also.
I agree with you 100% on that. And you need to store your hay too. If you're doing different cuttings, you need to store that hay where you know where it's at. When you do those hay tests, for anybody's out there that's, stacking hay in the barn, that way you know where the nutrients are and how to get to them. And we got a lot of hay out here around our part of the country. It's got a lot of Broom's Edge. Broom's Edge doesn't have good quality to start with, and it doesn't lose much quality either. So that might be some of the
right.
outside. And that Broom's Edge sheds that water a little better, some of that better hay. So, but yeah, I think we need to kind of pick up on hay testing too. For now, did y'all use that as an aspect, I guess, in y'all's research as well, to see how much nutrients it lost? Maybe was that something y'all looked at?
Basically, when I started my test, we were just doing by weight to see how much hay we lost. Another thing, back to talking about barns, some of my bigger producers, I got one guy that's got 300 mama cows. He wants to build more barns because, we go through years when we have extra abundance of hay. And he said, it don't bother me to have 2 or 3 barns of hay left over, so that if I have a bad year next year, I'm okay. One of the things I've found, a few years ago, I gave away some forage tests. And one of my older farmers, he passed away now, lived to be 95. But anyhow, he come to me and said, Moorehead, I want to run that test. And I want to test, that first barn I built? And I said, yes, sir, I remember that well. He said, there's hay in there I put in there the first year. He said, it's ruined now, isn't it? I said, Mr. Clayton, that hay in that barn may be better than hay than you cut last year. So we did an analysis on both, folks. His hay that's been in the barn 15 years tested better than the hay he cut the year before, because it varies depending on when you get it cut. But once you get it in the dry, boys, it's there. It's there.
Now, I had a question for Clyde. I just wanted to hit. I was looking through your some of the information you sent me, and you were talking about the Tennessee Master Beef Producer Program. Could you talk just a few minutes about that?
Yeah, I guess I have to back up just a little bit from that. Remember back a number of years ago when the tobacco settlement took place, with the states and the federal government, through the lawsuits with the tobacco companies, with money sent to the states to be used for farmers, that were put out of business, and all of this. Well, anyway, our legislative folks decided that they had better use for the money, and so we didn't really get any benefit out of it. And I'm saying we as farmers. So after how many years, Larry, we finally got some folks in the legislature that said, hey, we need to go back in there and pull some money back out of the budget to give our producers and pay them back. And so that's what happened. And so they set up the ag enhancement, which that's what Larry mentioned. Well, a part of that was to, hay barns and some breeding and some of those type things, which, are real beneficial. But what happens when you give somebody something? Do they really appreciate it? Do they really utilize it like they ought to? And our commissioner of ag at that time, he had a lot of foresight that I don't think a lot of people realized that he had. He said, if we take the producers that we got out here that are willing to make some changes, if we go in as a partner with them, I think we'll get more benefit than we would without, just handing them the money, because who knows where it would go. So one of the educational things that we first started out with was them being certified in beef quality assurance. That was just a standard thing. If you're going to participate, you did that. Very easy to do, didn't take much time. Well, as we started adding different programs, and hay storage was one of them, started looking at other educational things that we might do. We started looking around at other states, and we saw some of them had a master beef cattle producer program, which had components in nutrition, breeding, management, all those various things. So we started a master beef program that was tailored toward producers and the way we manage cattle here in Tennessee. So that soon became a requirement to participate in the ag enhancement program, was to go through that program. And what did it take? 28 to 30 hours of class time, Larry? I've forgotten now.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So you know, if somebody was committed enough to do that, when they got their money, they were committed enough to take it and utilize it exactly the way it's supposed to be done.
Okay, you're saying that some of the money from the ag enhancement, to get that money, that you had to do some educational work to get that money. Okay. Yeah.
And that, like Larry said, we've been doing this for what, 20 years now.
Pushing
still,
20, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's still educational requirements as a part of that. Now, in the beginning, we had a lot of producers like the ones that Larry's been talking about that were pretty gung-ho. They were going to do it whether they got any money or not, frankly, but it did help them as it went along. The further along we got in the program, we've had some producers that the only reason they went through the educational program was to get that percentage of the cost of the building or whatever it was they're going to do. But the majority of the folks, they took advantage of the program, and it's really helped the ag economy here in the state.
What Clyde's talking about there, if you're not a master producer in whatever field you're in, then you get 35% payment, but they limit the amount of money this year. Matter of fact, last fall when the sheets come out, they said they was going to pay up to $5,000 on the barn. Well, if you was at the 35% level, you had to spend $15,000 to get all your money. If you was at the 50, a master beef producer was at 50% level, so he could spend $10,000 and get the whole $5,000. And then there's less people applied than they thought, and they wound up paying $6,000 on barns. So each person that I got that applied for a barn this year got a total of $6,000. Now, you know, if they built a big barn, that didn't pay for half of it, but they will pay them up to $6,000. And Clyde was talking about the educational program. Now, if you're in the beef business, if you don't have BQA, they will kick your forms out. You've got to do beef quality assurance. Master beef or master row crop, that comes in addition to it. But you've got to be, if you're a beef producer, you got to do BQA, or a dairy producer, or whatever.
I like that. I like that y'all have standards and standard classes that you have to take and education behind ours. Now, we do have some good programs for cost share in West Virginia, and this is a good time to be looking at that. If anybody's out there listening, the month of June is when you sign up here for your conservation districts. And, you know, so if you're out there and you need lime, you need water troughs, cross fencing, exclusion fencing, you know, these are some of the programs that the conservation districts around the state can help with, and this is when you sign up for them this month. So make sure you get your applications in. But I would love to see some educational programs like y'all have in Tennessee go along with these conservation programs, because I think you're right. It makes that money count a little bit more, and it makes that money last too, because it's going to ensure that these producers are actually using these in their operations. I really like that.
I want to go ahead, Clyde.
Brandy, you're breaking out a little bit.
Well, if we have any questions from the audience, go ahead and put those in the chat box. I had a follow-up for Larry. Oh, we're having a little technical difficulty there. Um, Larry, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Um, can you were using the slang term slop as far as the for the feed um, from the Jack Daniel's distillery there. Can you just talk just a minute about the what they produce, what that byproduct is there from the distillery, and what your farmers use that for? I thought it was very interesting.
Yeah, be glad to. Do you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Jack Daniel produces, of course, they're in the whiskey business. Their byproduct is what comes out of the still after they take the alcohol off. When I first moved here, of course, they have expanded, and still are expanding. But anyhow, the mash that comes out of the still itself is around 92% water. Now, to dry it, they run it through a centrifuger, and after the centrifuge, that'll get it down to about 31 or 2% dry matter. Now, that can be hauled in a dump truck. We haul the mash, the spent stillage, we haul it in tanker trucks. Just remember, you're putting a lot of water in the animal. But once they run it through a centrifuge, then they run it through a dryer, and you got DDGS. And those things, they're selling out of the distillery today for $195 because corn and beans are high. Another product that we're using that they make, the liquid they sling off of the grains to make the wet grain, they used to sell the wet grains, but they don't have a place to store them, and they quit that. Another product out of that, though, that they sell now, they take and run that liquid through an evaporator, and they're coming up with a syrup. It looks like blackstrap molasses. It's a good feed. What I'm seeing with farmers that's buying it and feeding it to cows, we're getting the cows too fat. That stuff is 85–90% TDN. It's 10% fat, and it's 27% protein. That is whatever feed we feed. Once you take the water off of it, it's distillers dried grains is what it is. And I have a hard time explaining to some farmers, what the protein level is, but everything is figured on a dry matter basis. Now, on the liquid, the slop, as I call it, or the spent stillage, cattle need to weigh, I like to see them weigh 500 or better before you put them on it, because they're not big enough to consume a lot at this 350, 400-pound range. Now, I've got some boys that start out with 350-pound calves, feed grain, they get up to 400. Then we mix grain with the mash and carry them on bigger. And what we found out on the bigger cattle is if we'll add grain to it, we can increase our gains. When I come here 40 some odd years ago, we were getting a pound a day gains feeding the mash and hay. I got them feeding more hay. We get our production up between 1.5 pounds and 2 pounds a day. Then we ran into this group in Kentucky is where I saw it, that was actually adding grain to the mash. And that's when we go to our 3 pound a day gain. And that has really helped us because we're turning cattle over a month quicker. If we put I'm a big pusher of, if you're going to buy a calf and feed it for a while, you better put 300 pounds on him. So we're buying 550 weight calves, selling them at 850, 900. While when we sold some that went over 1,000 pounds. But if you don't put 300 pounds on a calf, the price break can kill you. If you're backgrounding, I'm a firm believer we need to put 300 pounds on, and we're able to do that. The other thing that's big in our county is Holstein replacement heifers. And again, we can feed pretty low quality hay and this spent stillage and get 1.5 pounds, 1.75 a day, which you don't want a heifer to gain no more than that. Because if you do, she's going to deposit fat in her udder, and she's not going to make a good milk cow. Did I answer any of your questions?
Yeah, I think that I just thought it was interesting. I mean that is a great example of using a local resource, Jack Daniel's Distillery, and it probably saves them using that liquid product from having to spend the money on drying that.
That's exactly right. I talk
That's a
about
win-win, win-win, Larry.
exactly. It's helping them. It's helping us. The other thing, keep in mind, we have a cheap feed when we pick it up at Jack Daniel. By the time you get it to your house, you've got a big investment. My biggest producer, and he sells about 2 to 3 tractor trailer loads a month through the video sale. But that boy's feed bill is less than his fuel bill on his truck, and he's 7 miles from the distillery. Not
Wow.
counting keeping up the truck. I mean, they basically we're buying it for 50 cents a ton, but the fuel bill gets expensive plus keeping up those trucks. And farmers don't have the best roads on their farm, and that's beating that truck up. So our big expense is in transportation.
Okay. Of course, every episode I always ask because I'm a music buff. So I have to ask Clyde first. Clyde, who's your favorite country music artist?
Oh gosh, that's pretty tough.
Pretty tough.
I kind of like Garth Brooks. He does a pretty good job for me.
Garth Brooks. What about you, Larry?
Well, because I'm from Tennessee, I'll have to say Dolly Parton.
Dolly Parton.
Yeah.
Dolly Parton has done a lot for Tennessee.
Yes, she has. She's Larry, check and see if you can turn up your volume a little bit there.
Actually, lower your headphones. Or your
Okay, I'm sorry.
There you go.
I pushed it up to get a drink of water.
Technical difficulty there. Okay. Good. Do we have any questions from the audience for
Randy had a
Larry or Clyde?
statement out there. I was talking about the sign up in June there for the Western or the Conservation District, but that is specifically the Western Conservation Districts. Each district is a little bit different in the sign up. Some actually happened in May. I think Brandy's Conservation District signups were in May. So check with your specific district to make sure that you get those signups and applications in the right time. But ours in the Western Conservation District is the month of June here.
Okay. I'll go ahead and put our weekly plug in for our upcoming guest on Mountaineer Farm Talk. Next week, we have Ray Smith from Kentucky talking about making quality hay. So we're going to have a couple weeks here talking about hay production. Friday, June 18th, we'll be talking about summer fly control for livestock. Jake Osborne from Merck Animal Health will be on the program. And then Friday, June 25th, Dr. Rocky Lemus from Mississippi State Extension will be talking about maximizing forage production with summer annuals. So we hope that everyone can tune in for those. Looks like some very interesting topics we'll be working on. Clyde, do you have any last thoughts for hay storage, hay production, as we're right on the just starting out for summer for a lot of producers? The season's just starting.
Well, 2 or 3 things. One is just be sure they're prepared for the storage. They need to check that building to see that everything's in good shape. They may have bumped one of those upright poles that holds the barn. You folks probably get a lot more snow than we do. I'd sure hate to see one of those barns come crashing down on our hay crop. That's not a good situation. Let me see. I had a couple other things. Be sure that surface where you're going to be putting those bales outside in particular is in pretty good shape. If you don't have some hay left outside, let's be sure that we get the water diverted around it rather than water coming down through it, because if that water comes down through where that hay is stored, it's just going to have more water to wick up, and you're going to have a whole lot greater losses. So kind of stay on that. The other thing is just be safe. A lot of these bales are getting bigger and bigger, and a lot of people are getting bigger tractors. Some of them are not. Some of those little tractors, no big bales. it gets pretty touch and go. We want those folks to be around next year when we're talking about this.
Larry, you have anything to add?
Yeah, I do. Clyde made me think. You know, when we started building barns, one of the things that we didn't do was prep the ground before we started. Spend $500 or $1,000, whatever it takes, on a dozer bill. Get that barn up out of the moisture itself. You know, you build a barn that water's gonna run through, you've ruined your hay before you get started. Do a little prep, get that water away from that barn. Like I say, I like plastic under gravel inside the barn. And then if you're gonna use geotextile under gravel, use that outside. You built a barn to keep it dry, so it's not going to get muddy in the barn. The mud's going to be outside where you drive through. One other thing, let me mention, and I've done a lot of work with hay feeders and stuff. One of the latest things we're looking at this past winter, we went up in Kentucky and saw the fence line feeders they're using. I'm a big believer in the cone hay feeders. That's a feeder that saves the most hay of anything we've got. The Baxters are a good one, but the cone hay feeder is top of the list. But the fence line hay feeders, you know, we destroy property hauling hay out in the field to feed cows. And this fence line deal is a feeder panel. We built them up to 30 feet long, 36 feet long. And you stick your hay in there, the cows will come eat it, but you do it off the road. You're not driving through your field. Yes, you don't feed hay, you don't have a mess around the feeder, whatever it is. But driving that tractor across that field is devastating. All right. Another thing, go in there after you feed hay, throw down a little crabgrass. You'd be surprised how much pasture you can produce there. And that crabgrass will reseed itself most years.
What was
Anyhow,
that variety that you talked about besides Red River crabgrass?
Quick and Big, I believe, is what
Big.
Dalrymple out in Oklahoma calls it.
I like that you put in a little spot there for the fence line feeders. I tried to get those up and going here last year, and I kind of got shot down, but I haven't given up on them yet. I'm still going to try to push those and get them going. I really like those fence line feeders, and I think there's, especially on the slopes that we have in West Virginia, you know, getting these farmers off these slopes when it's wet and muddy, and you know, I think, you know, there's a huge safety aspect in the fence line feeders, you know, because you usually get those are on flat ground, you know, you're close to the hay barn or by the road, you know, it's pretty safe. So I've been looking at y'all's Tennessee fence line feeders, and I really like y'all's programs, and I'm going to try to set something up here soon in the near future utilizing those fence line feeders with a manure storage, small manure storage barn off the side where you could scrape that through into the storage area. And kind of, you know, because these manure feeding pads that we have, they're very expensive, especially with the price of lumber going up. You know, you just went from 80,000 to 95,000 quick. So I think this is a very simple, inexpensive way to utilize these feeding areas.
Yeah. Eden Shell Farm in Kentucky is where we got these ideas.
Okay.
But I kind of like them. I plan on trying to fix one of ours at least. I had one guy put a concrete floor in his, and I'm going to try to build a rack to put the hay up on. Let it be like a cone hay feeder. The other thing we're trying to get producers to do is clean up that manure and carry it and spread it on the field. You know, it's good fertilize.
Well, that's why I want the manure storage aspect to the side, because, you know, you got 12 pounds of P2O5 and 40 pounds of K2O in every ton of hay that you're feeding, that you're getting 90% back through manure. You scoop that into the barn, you know, get enough to spread out, go spread it on a dry or frozen day. And I think I buy all my hay. I have less than 40 head of cattle. So I'm a firm believer, if you have less than 40 head of cattle, you buy your hay. So I'll use someone else's farm to fertilize my farm with.
There you go.
Evan, can you real quick tell our audience where they can watch the last couple weeks recordings, where they can access that?
Or can that they're right now housed on our WVU Wayne County Extension YouTube channel, and they should be under the playlist Mountaineer Farm Talk.
Wonderful. We are working on trying to get some of our older episodes available. So Evan, he's our tech guy. But again, I want to thank Larry and Clyde from University of Tennessee Extension. I thought we had some great conversation here. A lot of good info and tips for producers, and of course, even us extension agents, we learn something every time because we don't know everything. And I always tell people, our producers, I may not know the answer, but I know somebody who does. So
That's right. And if you ever meet a man that knows everything, he's either a fool or a liar.
Agreed.
Thank everybody for joining in for the Mountaineer Farm Talk, the voice of West Virginia agriculture, and we'll see you around the ridge.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.
Thank you. Sure did.
thank you guys.
Thank you.